This week we're reading quite a few sonnets, so I wanted to go over the definition of sonnet in its poetic form. It's a very particular kind of poem, but I assume that many of you may have come across it before in other courses. A guy named Shakespeare, for example, was famous for writing a whole bunch of them. So this may be review in part. If you have studied sonnets before, you know the conventional sonnet form. A sonnet is 14 lines written in iambic pentameter, and usually the subject is love. And that's where this course probably diverges from a lot of the other sonnets you might have read, in that very few of the sonnets we read in this course are going to be about love. Most of them are going to be about other things. Charlotte Smith's elegiac sonnets are more sorrowful. We'll read sonnets about nature, and so on. But it does get a little more complicated than that. There are two main kinds of sonnet: the Petrarchan, also called the Italian sonnet, and the Shakespearean or English sonnet. The Petrarchan sonnet has a particular rhyme scheme: ABBA, ABBA, CDE, CDE, or sometimes even CDC, CDC. Notice how few different rhymes are required in this poem, and the logic behind that is that in the Italian language, it's much easier to find rhyming words. A lot of the words, for example, end in vowels, so it's a lot easier to come up with that rhyme scheme than it is in English. Not impossible, of course, but that's one of the reasons why Shakespeare improvises and changes the format of the sonnet a little bit. In the Petrarchan sonnet, the first 8 lines are called the octave, and the last 6 lines the sestet. Again, logical names based on the Latin roots for 8 and 6. And the other significant feature is that a sonnet typically features what's called a volta, or a turn, between the octave and the sestet, in which basically the idea of the poem is turned around and viewed from a different perspective. That the octave presents one point of view on the situation, and then the sestet turns it around somehow and presents a different view, perhaps answering the original view. In the Shakespearean sonnet, we have a rhyme scheme that is ABAB, CD, EF, GG. So basically 3 quatrains of 4 lines each, divided up, followed by a couplet of 2 lines that rhyme. There also tends to be a turn in Shakespearean sonnets as well, but it tends to come later, very often between the last quatrain and the couplet. That couplet very often revises, turns around everything that's come before it. So just to give a brief example of what this might look like, the first of Charlotte Smith's elegiac sonnets, and here's the first quatrain. Which you can see from the highlighted portions that this is written in iambic pentameter. There is one trochaic substitution in line 2. Smiled has the emphasis in that line. And a trochee is basically the opposite of an iamb, so the stressed syllable precedes the unstressed syllable instead of following it. And so this can be done for various reasons, which we'll talk about in various poems. In this case, it shifts the emphasis and makes the transition from the first line to the second line more emphatic. We can see the rhyme scheme: AB. Hours rhymes with flowers. Tread rhymes with head. Notice too how the poem cues us to read particular words. If hours rhymes with flowers, then we're reading flowers as basically a 1-syllable word. Also, when you see when you see an apostrophe used instead of an ed ending, that basically is telling you you're not pronouncing the ed as a separate syllable. So doomed and snatched are one syllable words as well. So with the ABAB rhyme scheme, we're now expecting a Shakespearean sonnet. And that's confirmed in the second quatrain with its CD rhyme scheme. But notice here in line 5, but far, far happier is the lot of those. That word but is very often one of the words that suggests the turn in the poem, that one idea has been presented and now a different one is coming forward. So it's almost as if the turn comes a little early in this poem. The first stanza has been about the idea of artistic fame, and the second quatrain now is about the recognition of the suffering that comes with that fame. The third quatrain continues the Shakespearean sonnet rhyme scheme with its EF, EF. But notice the rhymes here, I and Sigh rhyme. Remove and love is an I rhyme. They're words that look like they rhyme but don't actually. But that doesn't mean it's a bad poem or that Charlotte Smith has made a mistake. But again, there's a deliberate reason for these choices, and in this case we can see how that introduces a kind of note of discord into the poem. The speaker is talking about unhappy love, and it's so unhappy that it doesn't even complete the rhyme in a satisfying way. So the kind of dissatisfaction the speaker is undergoing is transferred over to the reader. And then finally, the couplet. Ah, then how dear the muse's favors cost, if those paint sorrow best who feel it most. Again, another I rhyme, cost and most. And again, we might expect a kind of turn here, but it's not so much of a turn as an emphatic restating of the idea that was introduced in line 5. The idea that the success of poetry comes along with suffering. So the couplet kind of restates what the poem has been driving at, rather than in this instance changing it. And as I said, we're reading a whole bunch of sonnets this week, so a couple of the other videos will talk about some of the other sonnets and how this form is used.